Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel, or hello if you're new here today. In today's true crime video, we will be diving into the case of Peter Scully, and he is an Australian man infamously known worldwide as the world's worst pedophile. Disclaimer, this video is a true crime case, therefore viewer discretion is advised. We will be discussing an array of themes relating to true crime that may be triggering to some people. This case in particular has some extreme topics of pedophilia and crimes against very young children, so definitely make a decision for yourself whether you want to watch beyond this point or not. Otherwise, let's just get straight into the case. Peter Scully, at the time of his arrest, was a 52-year-old Australian man living in the Philippines. It was the 20th of February in 2015 when investigators tracked Scully down to the Filipino city of Malaybalay, and they had 6 warrants out for his arrest, all relating to the abduction and sexual abuse of 2 underage girls. But this was just the tip of the iceberg in relation to Peter Scully's heinous crimes in the Philippines. So let's just start way back at the beginning. Peter Scully was born in January of 1963, and he originally grew up in the suburb of Narre Warren, Victoria, Australia, which, fact, that is about 1 hour or so away from where I'm living right now. Peter Scully lived in Victoria, Australia with his wife and 2 children, and from most accounts that I read online, he just seemed like a very normal guy prior to his life of crimes. No one said that he was sketchy or anything like that. He was just depicted as a normal guy. So then somewhere along the way prior to 2011, Scully left his family and moved towards the city of Melbourne and was involved in a lot of fraud offences relating to property schemes. He was essentially a real estate / investment scammer, and from sources I read, it said that he ripped off investors something like 2.68 million Australian dollars, so a hefty amount of money. When Scully moved towards the city, he also started operating an unlicensed escort service to which he only had 1 woman working for him, which was his underage Malaysian girlfriend, and he would send her out to do sex work at parties in the city. So he was being a pimp and a scammer at this point in Melbourne, and now I think is where neighbours recalled him as definitely being a sketchy bloke. They said that he would basically do anything for money. It was said that Peter Scully would leave his Malaysian girlfriend / escort at random clients' houses for multiple days at a time, and the feedback from clients was that allegedly anything goes with this girl for the right price, so I can't imagine what kind of situations Scully left this woman in. So in around 2009, an Australian investigation began looking into the fraudulent activities that Scully was committing, and Peter Scully was aware that he was being investigated, I believe, and he knew that he was going to be charged at some point coming. So in 2011, he actually dropped everything and set off abroad, running away to the Philippines. Once Peter Scully was in the Philippines, his crimes quickly turned to an extremely dark place, just a whole nother level compared to fraud. Scully decided that he was going to start creating videos and pornographic material for the dark web. Peter Scully bounced around to an array of different towns and cities over his years in the Philippines. However, a lot of these places were actually poorer cities and towns, and therefore there were a lot of Filipino people struggling and in poverty. A lot of these people were actually children who were homeless and hungry out on the streets, and Peter Scully knew that he could lure underage children back with him on the pretense of providing them food, shelter, education, just a better life. And these children obviously believed him because they were hungry and homeless. Of course, Scully had no such good intentions, and this came with an awful and potentially life-threatening cost to these poor children. Sometimes he would even approach the parents of these children and say, look, I can bring your child back to my house, I can bathe them, I can give them fresh clothes, give them a hot meal, provide them with shelter, provide them with education so they can have a better life. And these parents believed him and basically served their children up to Scully, who was a pedophile, on a silver platter. Once Peter Scully kidnapped these children from the streets, he began making pornographic and pedophilic content for the dark web for money. Peter Scully ended up luring and kidnapping a Filipino girl by the name of Carmen Alvarez, and she was only 14 years old when she first met Scully. From there, Scully groomed this girl to essentially become his accomplice in kidnapping, abusing, and torturing children for his dark web videos. Scully groomed Alvarez from a very young age as if she was not only his daughter, but his girlfriend slash sex slave as well. So a very confusing, disturbing, and manipulative relationship. Scully then kidnapped a second accomplice who he groomed in the exact same way. Her name was Lizelle Margelio. So now he had two Filipino underage girls who he appointed to assist him in his dark web crimes. Peter Scully then created an international pedophile ring using the dark web, and he actually created his own production company called NLF, or No Limits Fun, which created some of the most vile videos I've ever heard of in my entire life. I heard somewhere that around 80% of content on the dark web is actually pedophilia content, which is sick. And from my understanding, there are different types of genres. One of these particular genres of pedophilia content on the dark web is called hurtcore, and hurtcore is essentially where adults are depicted inflicting pain and sexual torture on children. It can even go as far as children inflicting this pain and torture on each other and themselves as well. Hurtcore is known as the worst kind of pedophilia genre out there. Peter Scully's main focus on his No Limits Fun website or pedophile ring on the dark web was this genre of hurtcore, and he would sell these videos, photos, or whatever content it was to other members on the dark web that enjoyed this particular type of genre of pedophilia. If other users were to pay Peter Scully, they would be able to, one, see these videos, but I believe they also had access to particular forums and even live streams of this content, and they were even able to participate in telling Peter Scully what they wanted to see, like what kind of content they wanted to see next, or even during the live streams, comment what these people should do to these children, which is just sick that people would even participate in something so awful. For other criminals and pedophiles to make comments and suggestions on how to see these children suffer more is just... Peter Scully would sell these videos and content worldwide as well. They were going to Germany, UK, US, Australia, just absolutely international. He apparently had quite a large clientele worldwide. So in 2012, Peter Scully made his most infamous video series that is not only well known now in the hurtcore pedophilic dark web community, but the world now knows of it. So Scully and his female accomplices went out on the streets and gave parents of young homeless children the usual spiel, like I can give them food, I can give them shelter, I can give them education, I can give them a better life. I believe there were more children, but we are just going to be focusing on the 3 young individuals that I know of from my research. So Scully lured these children back to his house, and quickly things took a horrible turn for the worst. He was not offering them sanctuary as promised. He was going to use them to create dark web content for his hurtcore No Limits Fun website. So the 3 girls he kidnapped were 12-year-old Liza, 11-year-old Cindy, and Daisy, who was only 18 months old at the time. And he did the most horrific crimes against these children I've ever heard of. Scully created a 4-part video series which he labeled Daisy's Destruction, and these videos depicted Peter Scully torturing, sexually abusing, and raping these children. The videos, as their parts went on from 1 through 4, just got progressively worse. Apparently, Peter Scully had pixelated his face in the videos so he was not able to be identified by his face, and he also had 2 female accomplices with him who were masked to protect their identity as well, but they equally had everything to do with the horrible abuse on these 3 young children. These master accomplices, as you can probably guess, were Carmien Alvarez and Lizelle Margallo, Scully's two girlfriends at the time. During the video, Peter Scully ordered and directed Alvarez and Margallo to carry out these crimes against the children, and ultimately this is what ended up giving Scully away, as police were able to identify his accent, but we will get more into that when we talk about the capture of Peter Scully later. At some point over the duration of her abduction, 11-year-old Cindy was forced to dig her own grave, and then Peter Scully proceeded to strangle Cindy with a rope, which ended up killing her. Scully then proceeded to bury her in the very same grave that she had dug herself. Cindy's body was then covered under the floor of Scully's house, and Scully allegedly filmed this incident, him killing 11-year-old Cindy. So essentially, or allegedly, he's made a snuff film as well, which is obviously the worst kind of dark web video you can create. If you don't know what a snuff film is, it's just basically a video that shows somebody killing somebody else. I believe he did upload this snuff film, but I don't know much information about that. That could just be a rumor. I don't know whether it was part of his Daisy's Destruction video series or whether he uploaded it just to his No Limits Fun dark web website. The Daisy's Destruction videos were being sold online by Scully for $10,000 per part. So it cost 40 grand to watch the whole series. The videos began circling the dark web, especially after another hurtcore creator who went by the name of Lux promoted it apparently on his hurtcore website on the dark web. It started to get a lot of attention. I don't know how many people actually viewed it on the dark web because of its hefty cost. So then for some reason, Daisy's Destruction actually went viral and got leaked onto the regular web internet. I believe Lux had something to do with it being leaked, but I can't 100% say because there was a lot of conflicting sources. Daisy's Destruction got leaked onto what they call the surface web, which is what you're using right now to watch my video on YouTube. It's just like regular Google search internet. So obviously that was horrifying that Daisy's Destruction and its contents, its vile contents, were just on the regular internet for anybody to see. The videos began circulating in a few European countries and police were quickly onto it. I'm not entirely sure how they came across it, whether people were reporting it or not. However, they did manage to take it down as best they could, and they began an investigation right away because obviously the contents in this video were horrible and displayed multiple crimes that they needed to investigate. Dutch police seemed to be the first people onto it, and after having to, unfortunately for them, watch the videos and its contents, they believe that the male depicted in the videos was speaking a few Dutch words, hence why they were trying to open the investigation. However, it was later determined by an Australian officer that this man in the video was not speaking Dutch words, he was actually just speaking with a very thick Australian accent. Not only were they trying to uncover the identity of this male depicted in these horrific videos, but they were also trying to narrow down where the two women in the videos seemed to have come from as well. They noted that the women looked young, Asian, tan skin with very thick accents, and they thought that they had narrowed down the accents to being Filipino accents. So now there was a worldwide investigation into finding this man and the two women seen in the videos, and they narrowed down the location to the Philippines. So they headed over there to begin their long investigation. So flashing forward slightly to December of 2014, Peter Scully told his female associate Carmien Alvarez that he wanted her to go out and find two street kids because he wanted to adopt them and give them a better life. Alvarez then responded to Scully saying, well, why don't you take my little sister instead? But Scully insisted that she go out and find two random street kids and bring them back. And he specified that he wanted a girl of 9 years old and another girl of 12 years old specifically. And he told Alvarez to not come home until he had what he wanted. So Alvarez went out onto the streets, and she actually ended up finding two girls that were exactly the age that Scully wanted, 9 and 12, and they were actually cousins. And she lured them back to Scully's house by telling them that she would give them a meal because they were starving. When the two cousins returned to Scully's house with Alvarez, they were given a meal as promised. However, quickly things took a very bad turn for the worst. Scully forced both the girls to strip down to nothing and proceeded to take photos and videos of them whilst his accomplice Alvarez bathed them. The next morning, Scully ordered the two girls to go outside and begin digging holes, and when the girls asked him why and what they were for, Scully informed them that they were digging their own graves, and if they didn't comply, he would put them in there. And he was filming this for his No Limits Fun website, I believe, just filming their reactions, telling them that, you know, he would be putting them in their graves eventually, which is absolutely horrible. I can't even imagine how frightened those girls must have been. Later that evening, Scully told the girls to strip down again and to force them to perform sexual acts on each other, as well as Scully raping both the underage girls repeatedly. Alvarez was also present during the rape of the two underage girls and allegedly forced a pillow over one of the girls' faces whilst she was being assaulted. Scully kept the underage girls for a further few days, and he was just torturing and repeatedly abusing them over and over again for his No Limits Fun website. And on the last day of their abduction and ordeal, Carmen Alvarez actually walked in to find the girls naked and chained up in dog collars. For some reason, this is the point where she felt guilty, even though she found the girls in the first place and brought them back to a place I'm sure she knew was dangerous. She participated in the torture and assault a few days earlier with Peter Scully as well. Like, now that she sees them in dog collars, she thinks that this is the worst thing and she feels guilty. Just quickly, I did see an interview with Alvarez later, and somebody asked her whether she felt that Scully would ever do those kinds of acts to her, and she replied saying no, she didn't know that Scully was a dangerous guy and she always felt safe with him and she felt like he would never hurt her. So clearly she was obviously a victim herself in some way and being groomed from such a young age, because it was reported that she was his sex slave. So anyway, Alvarez came in, saw the girls locked up in dog collars, and she felt very guilty and bad, so she actually unlocked the collars and let the girls escape. So thank goodness these girls ran straight out of there and managed to escape, and they actually ran straight to the police station to report Carmen Alvarez and Peter Scully and just explain their whole ordeal that they had been through. And that was super, super brave of them because they were so young, and I'm sure they felt very scared about reporting this issue because I'm sure they thought Scully would come back for them maybe. So due to the girls reporting the incident, Carmen Alvarez was actually tracked down and arrested whilst Peter Scully went on the run. So in the meantime, authorities internationally are still trying to find out more information about these Daisy's Destruction video series that had been leaked on the internet. The Daisy's Destruction videos are just so horrific that not a lot is actually known about the contents of the videos itself. There are a lot of rumors and speculations, but only a handful of people have actually seen it. I've never seen it, obviously, but police, authorities, media and documentary makers aren't really allowed to talk about the contents because it is just so vile and it did involve minors, so a lot of the information is protected. But we do know that it is one of the most heinous crimes against children that people and authorities have ever seen, so that obviously explains to us how bad it must be. Detectives were doing their best to find out where this video had come from in the first place, but the dark web is often encrypted and it allows users to go by anonymously and even post anonymously, hence why it is so difficult for the government to regulate the dark web and catch criminals on the dark web. Now, miraculously, Daisy, the 18-month-old baby depicted in the Daisy's Destruction videos, actually survived, and it was said that she was actually rescued by her family. So I don't know whether Peter stole this baby from the family or whether Daisy's family gave her up because they thought that Peter was going to give her a better life as he promised, but either way, she was rescued and found alive. Although Daisy was found alive, she had sustained lifelong injuries and trauma to her body, and I'm sure that was not only physical trauma, I'm sure that was mental and emotional trauma as well. But yeah, I did hear that it caused lifelong injuries. So her ordeal must have been so horrific. 12-year-old Liza was also found alive miraculously, and this was because I believe one of the girls in one of the local schools was able to identify Liza through a photo when authorities were going around and questioning people trying to find these victims of Peter Scully. It was said that Liza's mother was getting worried about her after she hadn't heard from her daughter Liza in about 2 weeks after she had willingly handed her over to Peter Scully. I'm not sure whether the mother went and searched for Liza herself and found her, but either way she was found alive. However, Liza did also sustain lifelong injuries from her trauma. Unfortunately, it was too late for 11-year-old Cindy to be rescued. As we already talked about, Peter Scully ended up strangling her to death after producing the Daisy's Destruction videos and buried her body under his house. It was said that a young woman, which we most likely assume was Carmen Alvarez, actually approached Cindy's family and offered to take her with her and with Peter to provide Cindy with a better life. I think they did say, yes, you can take Cindy, and for a while Alvarez did keep in contact with Cindy's family to just update her on how she was going with her and Peter. However, after some time the contact just completely stopped, and it was said that Cindy's family were blocked from even contacting Alvarez. Alvarez had blocked like email addresses, phone numbers, changed the home address, so the family just completely lost contact with Alvarez and Cindy. I'm not sure whether Cindy's family went out looking for Cindy and Alvarez or not. However, after Alvarez was taken in by authorities after the underage cousins reporting their incident, Carmen Alvarez was actually able to show police where they could find a body in Scully's home, which later was identified to be Cindy's. Alvarez claimed that she was not there when Scully killed 11-year-old Cindy and buried her body, and people were asking, well, okay, how did you know where Cindy's body was then? And she just said, Scully told me everything. He told me that what he had done, and that's how I knew. So a lot of people don't think that's true. They just think that she's trying to disassociate herself with Scully and the crimes that they committed. So no one really knows whether she was present for Cindy's murder or not. So by now, the authorities are in the Philippines doing their long and intense investigation into finding the perpetrators in the Daisy's Destruction videos, and also trying to find any remaining victims that were seen in the videos. And please correct me if I'm wrong, because I saw a lot of different sources, but it was said that detectives actually honed in on Peter Scully's identity in particular because of the two cousins who reported their awful incident with a statement to the police, and it led to Peter Scully's associate Carmen Alvarez being arrested. As we just said before, Carmen Alvarez then actually was able to lead investigators to the body of 11-year-old Cindy, which was found in a house that Peter Scully had rented in the Philippines. I believe just from the detective teams getting small pieces of information and compiling it together, they were questioning a lot of people in the community about whether they had seen a foreign Australian white male in the area, after getting statements from the two cousins, the victims, probably interviewing Scully's associate Carmen Alvarez. All this information sort of led them to Peter Scully, from my understanding. So they compiled a lot of evidence and they knew exactly who they were looking for in the end. If you remember back to the beginning of the video, police were already investigating investigating him years prior because of Peter Scully's fraud offences. So I think maybe some kind of connection might have been made from that as well, as they knew that Peter Scully had fled somewhere internationally. So finally, on February 20th of 2015, police located the house that Peter Scully was currently staying in and arrested him after having 6 warrants out for his arrest, which all related to the abduction and sexual abuse of the 2 underage cousins who reported the incident. Scully was then escorted by authorities down to the police station whilst police and detectives raided his house. Upon the raid, it was said that officers were able to find the dog collars and chains that the 2 underage cousins were said to have been locked up in during their abduction. They also found memory cards, cameras, hard drives, which police unfortunately would have to sit and sift through for evidence, and they knew that it would contain pornographic material. It would have been an awful task to have to sift through all this horrible material on these cameras and hard drives, but authorities knew that the victims suffered so much, they were innocent children, and that their perpetrator needed to be behind bars. Police also knew that these memory cards and hard drives may contain information on whether there were other child victims, dead or alive. From this investigation, it was said that allegedly Peter Scully may have somewhere up to 75 victims, which it's just horrifying. Like, where are the rest of these children? So now Peter Scully is in police custody, and one of his associates, Carmian Alvarez, was already in police custody, but he still had his second female accomplice witnessed in the videos and identified as Lizelle Margalio, despite her face being covered with a mask. Lizelle Margalio was eventually tracked down and arrested as well for her part in the crimes against these children. However, it was said prior to her arrest that she kept in contact with Peter from jail and continued to upload pornographic material to the No Limits Fun website on the dark web. So I think that really shows what kind of person she is, if she was even just continuing to upload this content. And Peter wasn't even with her at the time, he was in jail. So it was also alleged that Peter Scully had another female accomplice by the name of Dorothea Chia Chi, and she was also arrested, as well as 4 other male accomplices who allegedly helped run the production of these child pornography films for Peter Scully's No Limits Fund. Australian Federal Police located 15 different filming locations in the Philippines, which consisted of 5 different houses. So Scully moved around a lot whilst he was on the run. Detectives literally did this by just going from house to house, trying to match up the images that were seen in the pornographic materials filmed by Scully, matching up the flooring, the stairs, the tiles of the houses. And I've actually linked a video down below where you can see them filming this as they find it. It's very eerie to see where those children were kept and how they match up with those photos. So Peter Scully ended up pleading not guilty to his crimes, which forced around 10 of his victims to have to relive their horrible ordeals up on the stand so they could testify against him. It was allegedly said that Scully at his trial was laughing and snickering about his crimes, and in jail he actually demanded access to all kinds of privileges that for some reason he felt that he was entitled to. He was said to have demanded things like having access to a phone and a fan for his cell, because allegedly he said it was too hot for him. And he also said that he wanted fresh foods such as beef, pork and chicken to eat, but don't worry, he was denied all of these requests, thank goodness. Scully later says that he was sexually assaulted in some way by a priest growing up in Melbourne, Australia, but it's unclear if that statement is true or false. Scully claims that he was not a pedophile before arriving to the Philippines, and that he has no victims in Australia, and that he certainly never harmed his 2 children, because if you can remember, he is a father of 2. So then, around October of 2015, a fire randomly started and burnt through a room, I guess, of evidence that they were holding against Peter Scully for his record and trial. This room held all the videos, the hard drives, cameras, all of Scully's electronics, and the fire basically destroyed a lot of this evidence that they were keeping against Scully. Many people believe that Peter Scully actually bribed a local police officer to start this fire so it could destroy the evidence of him abusing children on video. And they think this because the Philippines at that time was a very corrupt place. So Scully may have paid this officer off to set this room on fire. Despite this fire destroying the evidence, in June of 2018, Peter Scully was sentenced to life in prison in the Philippines. Carmen Alvarez and Lizelle Margallo also received life sentences for their roles in the crimes. I believe Scully is still being somewhat investigated, as it was alleged that he did have somewhere up to 75 victims possibly, so I think they are still looking into other crimes that he may have committed, even though he is behind bars. When Carmen Alvarez was being interviewed later in prison, she was about 18 years old at that point, and a reporter actually asked her if she knew at the time what she was doing was illegal, like sexually abusing and torturing children, and her reply was just simply no. And the reporter just awkwardly was like, okay. Like, how can you not understand that that is wrong? I mean, even her 14-year-old self should be able to understand when a child is in pain and suffering, and that is wrong if you are inflicting that pain and suffering upon them. I think it's pretty obvious. I have linked videos to the 60 Minutes interviews that Tara Brown did for the Peter Scully case. This 60 Minutes program is a very popular Australian television show. They actually show the Australian Federal Police looking for Scully in the Philippines. They interview Peter Scully, Alvarez and Margallo, and they actually interview some of the victims, but it is quite sad hearing the victims recount their stories, so just be prepared for that. Just a warning before you click on those videos, they actually show the bones and remains of 11-year-old Cindy being uncovered at Peter Scully's old rental house. So it is very confronting, very insightful at the same time. However, it's truly heartbreaking and very hard to watch. So just decide for yourself whether you want to watch that. In this 60 Minutes interview, Peter Scully also said that he is writing a tell-all journal about the insights to his crimes, and he sort of insinuated that he would be answering the questions as to why he did it and maybe even why he's a pedophile. It has been a few years now, and from my understanding there is no such journal that has appeared yet, so I don't know whether this is true or whether he's just trying to gain some sort of publicity or stay relevant while people wait for this journal. So he might have just been saying that because he's a psycho. Peter Scully is also hated on top of this because he allegedly had to have taxpayers' money fund his legal fees because he couldn't find a lawyer that he wanted to represent him. And I believe taxpayer money does go to overseas criminals who have very hefty charges and sentences against them. So people were absolutely outraged that they were somewhat potentially funding this guy's legal fees. Despite Scully's life sentence, a lot of people felt that the death penalty should be brought back because of how severe Scully's crimes were, despite the death penalty actually being abolished back in 2006 in the Philippines. Some people have said that they feel that he deserves to be shot by a firing squad due to the nature of his crimes because he was just so cruel to those innocent children. In almost every article and interview I watched whilst researching, police and detectives all referred to this case as the most devastating thing that they had ever seen. And it brought so many caseworkers to tears because they had to watch the video to compile evidence against Scully. One officer said that she just felt like crying talking about the videos because she felt while she was watching the videos that she could feel the pain and suffering of those children. And that's just obviously so heartbreaking to think about. And most of the officers said that those videos will never go away from their memory, even though Scully is behind bars. it just will haunt them forever and that they can't help but think about it. Really, the only people that have viewed the Daisy's Destruction video are police and relevant officers that were working on the case, as well as criminals on the dark web. And because it was leaked for that short time on the surface web, I'm not sure how many regular people actually stumbled across it and saw it, either on purpose or accidentally. But this is why there's so many rumors about the video and its contents, because only a handful of people have actually seen it. So that actually brings us to the end of this case today. And I know there was a lot involved with this one and a lot of conflicting research that I saw online. So if you have actually heard of a different version of events to mine today, then please forgive me. There are so many conflicting sources on the internet. I just tried to compile the most consistent information that I found online. Please ensure that you are not only respectful to each other in the comment section, but towards the victims as well, as we were talking about crimes against very young children and innocent children today. If you're interested in true crime cases, you're more than welcome to subscribe to my channel. And with that all being said, I do hope to see you in my next video. Bye guys.